Hello and welcome to this tips and techniques video from Master Your Photography. In this series we've carefully crafted a collection of short videos designed to provide you with key points on specific topics without any of the unnecessary waffle. Our goal is to give you practical information that you can immediately apply to your own photography. We understand that your time is precious, so we've condensed each video to deliver concise, actionable information. With our tips and techniques series, you'll gain the knowledge and the confidence to improve your photography in no time at all. So, that's probably enough waffle, let's get started. We're going to look at the main photo file formats. So these are the file types that you will use to store your photos. Now I've chosen to divide these into three main types: raw files, lossless files, and lossy files, and I'll explain more about each one. If we start with raw files, now these are the files that your camera records straight from the camera sensor. So these capture the maximum amount of data, but because of that they can be quite large and require more storage space. Now each camera manufacturer has their own version of a raw file, but there is a universal one called DNG, which is an open standard that was developed by Adobe. The next type of file is what I call a lossless file, and the two main types are TIFF and PNG files. And what this means is you can open them and save them many times and you'll get no loss of quality, because even when they're compressed, the compression does not throw away any of the data. A TIFF file is brilliant for producing high quality prints, and the advantage of a PNG file is that it supports transparency. A lossy file, on the other hand, throws data away, hence the term lossy. And lossy files are the most common type, and these are JPEGs, and that's what most photographers are using. Now you can optimize the compression settings to retain image quality or save storage space, but whichever way you look at it, it is a lossy file format and data can be lost. Regardless of the camera that you're using, every time you press the shutter button, then a raw file is recorded somewhere in your camera. Not all cameras will allow you to save that raw file before it's been processed and presented to you as a JPEG, but many of them will do, and it's often just a setting that you need to tweak. Even many phones will now shoot raw files in the form of DNG. A raw file tends to look a little bit flat and grey and lifeless before any processing has taken place. What happens in your camera is the raw file is put through a process which uses a standard set of parameters to produce a result that is fairly pleasing usually, and this file is then saved as a JPEG onto your memory card. The downside of letting your camera do this processing and generating a JPEG file for you is that it has to be done fairly quickly every time you take a photo, and in doing so, by producing that JPEG file, some of the data from the raw file is actually thrown away. If you can actually save the raw file yourself, then you can bring it into specialized software such as Lightroom or Photoshop and actually extract a lot more of the information that is stored within that file to produce what is usually a much better result than can be produced in camera as a JPEG. TIFF and PNG files fall into our lossless file category. So what this means is they use compression techniques, but in doing so they don't throw any data away, so you're retaining the maximum amount of information possible within the file. So if you've processed a raw file and you want to then produce a high quality print from it, it's a really good idea to save that file as a TIFF file and then send that off and have your print produced from it. You can open and resave that file many times without any loss of quality. PNG files are also lossless, so no data is thrown away even though they can be compressed when you save them. They tend to have quite a specific use, and that is when you need an element of transparency. So if you have a photo where the subject has been cut out from its background, then it's ideal for that kind of situation, or graphic use on websites. In general, you don't tend to use them for producing prints from, but there's no reason why you can't. JPEG files are the file types that almost every photographer will be familiar with, because almost every camera on the market produces JPEG files as standard. Now, JPEG files fall into that third category of lossy file types. And what we mean by that is they throw data away by compressing the file in order to save space. So they have some advantages in that they take up less space on your memory cards or on your hard drives, but the disadvantage is that if you open and save and open and save and repeat that process many times on a JPEG file, then the quality can be degraded quite significantly. So just to recap, we've got three main file types. We've got our raw camera files with maximum data. We've then got lossless files and lossy files. So let's look at the advantages and disadvantages of each and when you would use them. Starting from a raw file, you will always get the very best image quality because you're capturing the data straight from the image sensor in your camera. But the disadvantage, of course, is that it needs more storage space and it's an extra step in the processing in order to get a finished JPEG out at the other end. DNG is a raw file format, and because it's an open standard, it can be really useful to use for archiving, so that you're almost future-proofing your archive of images. The big advantage of our lossless file types, such as TIFF and PNG, are that you're not losing any data. So if you want to produce really high quality prints, then a TIFF file is a really good way to go. A PNG file has the added advantage of transparency, so it tends to get used for web applications and graphics. And finally, our lossy file format, which in most cases is the JPEG file, the one that most cameras produce automatically, the one that most people are familiar with. It has some massive advantages in that it's ubiquitous and it makes it really easy to share files and post things on social media. So it definitely has its uses. You just need to be aware that if you're opening and saving JPEG files many times, then you will start to lose quality. So that's a quick overview of the three main file types: your raw files, which can be proprietary formats from each camera manufacturer, or a DNG file, your lossless files, which tend to be TIFFs or PNGs, and your lossy files, which are the JPEGs that we all know and love. Each file type has its own unique advantages and sometimes disadvantages, so it's important to learn which one you should use when and where. Thank you for tuning in to Master Your Photography's Tips and Techniques series. We hope you found this video useful and practical. Remember, each photo you take is a stepping stone towards becoming a better photographer. So, get out there and capture the world in your own unique way. Until next time, happy shooting.